live.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody to Indexer Office Hours number 44. Today is the 4th of January and it is 2022. Happy New Year, everyone. Today's agenda has been posted in the Indexer Office Hours chat channel in Discord, so please find it there to follow along. And if anyone is new to Indexer Office Hours, welcome. Please participate, and you can do that by requesting to join the stage and speaking, or you can ask questions via text in the Office Hours chat channel. We've got an exciting agenda today that I hope we can get through. And we're gonna start, I guess just with, welcome back and Happy New Year regards. Does anyone want to share any thoughts about the new year? Come on. We got some New Year's resolutions out there, I'm sure.
That the stock graph doesn't crash anymore, maybe. Especially
A worthy
during
goal.
holidays. Yeah.
I have onboarded my girlfriend to Web3 over the holidays, so I'm happy about that and proud of that. Most importantly, because she wanted it and is really excited and she loves it so far.
That's fantastic. Did anyone else manage that?
Well, that's very cool. I'm trying to do the same for my dad.
Can somebody write a guide, please?
Yes, please.
One by one, we'll get them all. Cool. So, I want to just highlight two amazing pieces of news that happened over the last few weeks, and that has been the announcements of both Semiotic AI and the Guild joining the ecosystem as core developers. It's hard to understate the significance of these teams joining the ecosystem. Semiotic just brings incredible expertise on the R&D front to the protocol, and we're really lucky to have them on board. And similarly, the Guild, really are, the underlined GraphQL experts in the ecosystem with, some of the largest GraphQL using customers in the world, and also responsible for many of the open source tools that underpin the entire GraphQL ecosystem. So, having both of these teams join us is a huge way to start the year, and I'm certainly happy to have them on board, and huge congratulations to those two teams.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Oh, hey, Alexis. Cool. I also want to give a shout out to 𝗨𝗀𝗧𝗧. So over the last few weeks, there have been 3 amazing episodes that came out. Number 42 with Alex from Streaming Fast. I really would highly recommend indexers to listen to that one. There's a lot of great juicy detail on the fire hose and some of the vision and design that kind of underpinned that approach. So I definitely recommend listening to that. Number 43 was with Sam from Semiotic, and is a really great way of getting some insight into some of the amazing skills that they're bringing to the table. And finally, number 44 was with Kyle from Edge and Node. And Kyle's joined the ecosystem recently, but huge hire for Edge and Node, and really interesting kind of journey and perspective that he brings to the ecosystem too. So I'd really encourage you all to have a look at those episodes. The link to GRT is in the agenda, but it's grtiq.com. Okay. On to our first regular segment, Repo Watch. So starting with Geth, 12 days ago, we had a release, version 1.10.14. It's definitely a recommended release, so if you run Geth, please update. And just scanning through the changelog, one thing that kind of jumped out at me is that this release ships EVM optimizations that improve bytecode evaluation by more than 20%, which seems like a pretty significant performance boost. So yeah, do upgrade. And then just maybe as a thought, I think, yeah, as we see particularly high throughput EVM chains like Polygon and BSC roll this Geth release, down into their forks. I hope that brings some stability improvements because, EVM execution tends to be a lot of what these nodes do. So hopefully that yields some benefit for those chains. Onwards, 18 days ago, we had a release from 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀. That's the 2021.12.03 release. Personally, I've upgraded to that and didn't see any issues. Change log is pretty boring. Did anyone have experiences, good or bad, with that? Okay.
Not upgraded yet.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a critical upgrade or anything, so I guess one thing that I noted, I know we've spoken about this before, Jim, but the ETH65 P2P protocol has been dropped from the latest release of 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀, so it will only operate using the 66th version of that protocol, ETH66. So that should halve the number of peers by default. But otherwise, the changelog looks pretty boring.
I think Vincent posted something in the 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 channel stating a new kind of, new official release or pre-release of the Rust implementation of 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 that is 1.5 up to 2 times faster than to sync to blockchain compared to the regular 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 node.
Yeah, I saw that. So that's a 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, the Rust implementation. Definitely check out the 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 channel in Discord to see that link. Maybe someone can drop it in office hours as well. It is worth saying that, that's nowhere near production ready. I believe like these tests are largely testing the staged sync pipeline. So, and I think you might have to bootstrap a 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 with a 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 database. So we're not quite, there as an independent standalone client. But yeah, it's amazing to see the 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 team just continue to deliver these massive performance improvements.
I was also glad to see that the Ethereum Foundation has done a new round of grants for all of the various different clients, including all the flavors for ETH2.
Yeah, great to see that. Okay, Open Ethereum, not much to say. Last release was 3.3.2 28 days ago. Long live Open Ethereum.
Lol.
Okay, touching on Streaming Fast's Geth fork. We kind of I see that we don't have the latest Geth release that we just spoke about. 1.10.14 has not yet been merged into Streaming Fast Geth fork yet. Looks like the latest versions we probably touched on last IOH, which was 1.1.7 for BSC and 0.2.13 beta 2 for Polygon. Okay. One other.
Give me a second. I have a question. What will happen with all these, like old Ethereum clients when we switch over to ETH 2.0?
Wow. I'm definitely not the expert there. And that is maybe I was going to say maybe we should have that chat offline, but Let's get through Repo Watch, and it's definitely something we can talk about in the open discussion piece.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So in the last couple of IOHs, we spoke about some of the changes to GraphNode and how we were getting closer to removing the manual allocation closure workflow for subgraphs that had failed. And subsequently, we've seen a couple of instances where there has been a failure and GraphNode still refuses to generate a POI. And we spoke about in the last IOH, we dug a little bit more into why that is and how that works. And I'm just going to drop in the Indexer Office Hours chat or Office Hours chat channel a link to the issue on GraphNode. So yeah, if you experience any subgraph failures and the GraphNode refuses to report a POI and you need to engage in the manual workflow, please look at this bug and consider adding the details of that failure to the issue. It's definitely safer that issues are considered non-deterministic by default, or failures are considered non-deterministic by default. And so there are a few instances where a deterministic failure is not being marked as deterministic, and so GraphNode is refusing to produce, the deterministic failure POI. And just over time, we need to identify these cases, and if we're sure that the error type is deterministic, then update GraphNode to reflect that. So yeah, just putting that out there for anyone that experiences that issue. Please help us improve GraphNode's behavior.
I think open is missing from that list, so if anyone's closing open soon, then that would be one to add. Because I know that's, I'm pretty sure that's failing to generate a POI at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember whether I added open. Yeah, if
I don't
any,
think you did. I've looked through them, like QMNRK, or can't remember the end few, but it's not in the list at the moment. But I'll add it. If somebody else doesn't add it, I'll add it because I'm on open. I'll need to close it in the next 14 days. So.
Thank you, sir. That's super helpful. Getting us the list of these issues. Okay, moving on. Oh, Nate, did you have something to say?
Oh, no, sorry. My mic was on. Sorry.
It's all good. Right. Okay, next up, getting onto the indexer repo. So we have a new official release tagged, which is 0.18.4. But there's also 0.18.6 tagged. And we've got Ford joining us to tell us more about the 0.18 branch. Ford, are you there?
Yep. Hey, all. Hopefully you can hear me better now. So I actually just this morning updated it. So the 18.4 is marked as a pre-release. Right before the break, some indexers noticed a bug on that one that led to some issues. So I fixed that in 18.6. So I now have 18.6 as the official latest release on GitHub. So if people could start using that, that would be amazing. If you have questions about the bug, we can get into that in detail, but there's some good chat history there as well. If you guys want to go look at the investigation, we got into detail on Discord.
Awesome. Well, that's really clear and simple. Thanks, Ford. Everyone, please update to 0.18.6. If you run a testnet node, please give it a try there first, just as a matter of good practice, and then roll it out on mainnet. If you don't run a testnet indexer, please consider running one. And if you don't see the value in that, then please let us know why. We want the testnet to be maximally useful. Shout if you can think of reasons why that's not the case.
Yeah, definitely recommend running on testnet. It's always nice to have that testing environment. And I also just wanted to recap just to let you guys, if anyone was not in the previous Indexer office hours, version 18 of the Indexer software adds support for type 2 transactions. And it also adds some updates to the indexer CLI to improve readability of the status output. Go ahead to the release notes and see the change overview if you guys have interest in more detail.
Cool. Yeah, I will drop a link to the release notes in the chat channel. And it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade. I mean, type 2 transactions themselves should add a non-trivial, or like it should reduce gas costs in a non-trivial way. And there's also some other batching goodness in there as well. So definitely a worthwhile release. Cool. Turning to PRs on the indexer repo, there are two, two that I'll mention. The first is this one, 336 from Ford, which adds rate limiting to some of the, what's the right word? Like ancillary endpoints. So the status, cost, operator, and network endpoints. These endpoints are not used for actually serving subgraph queries, but obviously represent something of an attack vector. So it's great to see rate limits added there.
On that point, I don't want to derail the discussion, but at some point I would love to hear how some of you as indexers are performing or setting up firewalls, rate limits, reverse proxies, and stuff like that. In addition to this built-in rate limiting, I'm going to be in the near future sharing a Nginx setup for a reverse proxy to add additional rate limiting for any indexers that would find that useful.
That would be great.
Quick question.
Fire away.
So are we saying we're going past 17 in prod now, or is 18.6 safe for prod?
Yeah, 18.6 should be safe for prod. That issue that, by the way, thanks a lot for helping before the break. You really helped identify that bug really quickly. And I fixed that issue, so yeah, it should be good to go.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. One other thing I want to do is looking at the pull request list for the indexer repo. I see a PR coming in from Hope, from Figment. And yeah, I just want to shout out I don't know if you've merged a PR before, Hope. If so, apologies. But if it is your first contribution, thank you for your contribution. It's awesome to see more indexers get involved and open PRs. Okay. So next up, we have Protocol Watch, and Juan is joining us to cover that. Thanks, Juan.
Hey there. Yeah, you're welcome. So I'll be kind of co-hosting this segment from now on, hopefully, as long as I can. So yeah, there hasn't been that much movement in the protocol, basically repos, contract form governance, and form research. Mostly, it's been a few PRs from Ariel on the contracts side of things. It's basically being worked on. I think some of them are in the audit phases, and as we all know, audits are basically super complex right now. It's really, really difficult to find time for an audit. So yeah, I think some of them are delayed on that, given that they haven't been updated in a while. For example, the validation of the POI, that is basically checking that the POI is fresh instead of just having like 48 hours of leeway. There are other PRs still stale in the contracts repo, like the subgraph split, which was made by Yona. That's kind of like a proof of concept implementation for possible multiple version like signaling when you're updating your subgraphs. I think it's just a proof of concept, but it's there. So yeah. Then the main improvement that is gonna be released soon, I guess, seems to be the subgraph ownership transfer. with NFTs and stuff. That's also one of the PRs that it's on the contracts repo. It's still stale, but it's I think it's being worked upon by Ariel. So yeah, that's about it from the contract side of things. Then if we go to the research and protocol improvements on the forums, we can see that there's been some discussion regarding the, I don't remember if it's a proposal, but it's like trying to change the bonding curves on the GNS and the curation level, swap them around and see what happens. There's been a few discussions. There's nothing set in stone yet. It's basically trying to find out a way of improving a little bit the curation experience and also making it so that it's more stable and can be used as a building block for future improvements on curation. Aside from that, we also have there was also some discussion regarding potential bad behavior from indexers. I think this was already touched upon on the last index surface hours, but since there's been some more discussion, I think we might be able to discuss it a little bit afterwards in the open discussion section, if you guys want, of course. And then there's the obvious issue that was happening protocol level last week, which I was involved with, which was the crashing of the mainnet subgraph for the graph network. I could probably go into more detail if you guys want, but basically the issue has been solved by 2 hotfixes. But yeah, basically both the gateway and the hosted service now have a functional fixed version running, so everything should be smooth sailing from now on. It was just an unfortunate oversight on one of the edge cases for default names. But yeah, that's about it.
One question I had was, do we need to change? I know in the config, there's like a hash basically for the network subgraph. Do we need to update that?
You could update that. We haven't released an official version. We could release. I think I released some like unofficial version in the meantime, so that you can unblock it if you need to do something. We could probably announce an official version soon. I think we can work it out with Ford. There's not that much need to do it anyways, because the gateways are working flawlessly so far, and they are running a fixed version, so indexers should be working anyways. But we could like probably deploy a non-IPFS version for you guys soon, so that you can avoid relying on the gateways.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Yep.
Any more questions for Juan? Cool. Thanks, Juan. I'm sure we'll touch on some of those things later. So next up, it's been a hell of a year, guys. 2021 was quite something for the graph. And just as like a quick fire list, I mean, obviously the hosted service is not what we're all working towards, but it is a great proxy for measuring traction in the ecosystem, outside of what the decentralized network can support. And the hosted services had, an incredible year, extending, blockchain support up to 26 chains today, I believe. Obviously, as the decentralized network adds chains, we can migrate all of this volume onto it. But yeah, 26 chains, billions of daily queries, more than 20,000 subgraphs. It's hard to believe that the decentralized network only launched a year ago, and we've had over 230 indexers sign up. We've got about 160 of those active at the moment, 11,000 delegators, 2,300 curators, and over 300 subgraphs, all on the decentralized network today. We've also launched a complex, beast of a crypto economic protocol, and we've seen governance effectively coordinate to agree and upgrade that protocol multiple times. We've had an incredible increase in the core development capabilities, and also the decentralization of core development in the ecosystem. We obviously have the incredible original team in the form of Edge and Node, Streaming Fast, Figment, Semiotic, and the Guild, all adding their own, core competencies and, bringing their kind of own unique value into the ecosystem. And of course, we've had some very significant product improvements along the way. Non-EVM chain support, the fire hose, new gateways, and the list goes on. So it's been an amazing year for all of us. I want to pause to see if anyone has any, retrospective thoughts to share over the last year, or did it go the way you think it did? What are you excited about? Please share.
I think it's kind of staggering, really, how much progress has been made in the last year, and really on all fronts, right? In the day to day of being involved, you like to sort of, us indexers are focusing on our queries per second, or how many new subgraphs are coming along, or how much are we migrating away from the hosted service. But if you sort of stand back and look at 2021, that's just one of like many metrics that you can use to measure not just success but progress, really, right? The technical progress, the progress in terms of the number of the community, all the different core teams that have joined, the individuals that we've all watched joined, and we warmly welcome into the indexer community and all the other stakeholder communities. The governance work that's being done, that Oliver is pushing very hard on, the work that Eva and Martine are doing at the foundation, the continued leadership from Edge and Node, the recognition of things that fail and that we need to try to do in a different way. The new stuff that is coming down the line, like verifiable indexing and zero knowledge stuff that, a lot of people don't know that there's some serious brain power in the zero knowledge space at Edge and Node from day one. There's stuff going on at every possible area of the protocol that you could think of, and we don't think about that from the day to day. It's only when you look in retrospect you see how far we've come, and like in another year's time we probably won't recognize a lot of what we see in terms of the mechanics today. A lot of things will have changed, and a lot of the new technologies that we've been talking about will start to have come to fruition. So I feel like we're only at the start of this journey, and for such an important tool that really reaches into every aspect of decentralization, and in terms of dApps, there's a ton of work to be done, and we're just going to continue grinding away at it. And I'm really positive for what we're going to achieve in the next year.
I joined the Graph ecosystem about a year ago, back then as a delegator, and I can only imagine how much work has gone into launching the decentralized mainnet about a year ago, and then to see what has happened over the last year is just astonishing from a technology perspective, sure. But one aspect, I think, too, what I feel I witness every day is the community, how the community really has grown. We've had a difficult time with GIP 002 early on last year, and it showed that there were voices in the community that were kind of just very distracting, and there was a lot of emotions going on. But since then, I think I've seen a growth in the community where I see a lot of relationships have been developed, across different stakeholder groups at so many different levels. And, the way we are collaborating around opportunities, problems, issues, proposals has really starkly improved. And that's, one aspect that I'm really excited about.
And also from a core dev perspective, I really never worked in an environment like this, like multiple companies like trying to improve the same protocol, or I always worked in like one company, like one huge team, and when Streaming Fast and Semiotic and all the teams joined, I didn't know how that would work out. And from like my perspective from the inside is that like it really worked, and I'm really excited for the next year and I mean this year, right?
Yeah, wow, what a year. Thanks for the recap, Jim. You really hit some big points. I can't believe it's only been a year. We had that really intense test net where we were, constantly iterating. We had new software coming out every week, and I feel like the indexer community has really like grown so strong from then, and we've gone through a lot together. And I think this next year coming up is going to be a really big one for us. I think we can be the backbone of a lot of decentralized applications and growth into the mainstream. And I'm really excited to get this going.
Yeah, I would like also to add on the core devs, what a year it was. Like at the beginning when we joined, we had our own ideas. We proposed some stuff. Like we had some solution that we thought that it's gonna be working, and then directly we started discussing with the other core devs, and we found out that there's that could be done in a better way, and then we adjusted, and now we came up with the new solutions, and all that to say that we are so many different teams coming from different backgrounds, and to be able to unite on a certain objective very fast, and to be able to adapt, to change, to dump some solutions and jump into other solutions in that speed. That is fascinating for me, and I think that manifests like the power of the graph, how much everyone here, like the community and the core devs, believe in what we're doing, because I think that's what like uniting everything and making so like we're together. Like as you were saying, there's 5 core devs right now working on the graph and a very large community. So I think like that manifests the power of what we're building here.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. It's truly a privilege to be able to wake up and work with so many independent and inspired people. Honestly, the caliber of people that I work with every day in this community is unlike anything I've experienced before. And it's incredible. So thank you all. And yeah, let's kill it in 2022. Next, we actually have managed to get to the open discussion part with 25 minutes left. So we got a bit of time to chat. Some of the topics that are on the list include Ford's question about reverse proxying requests to indexer service. Shall we just jump straight into that?
Sure. Yeah, so if anyone has any insight into how you're setting up firewalls or reverse proxies, be interested to talk about that. One idea that I had was to provide an Nginx reverse proxy setup that has built in some simple rate limiting, so you could have an external rate limiter so that excessive or burst requests don't ever actually make it to your components, and you don't have to scale up CPU on your indexer service to handle the volume. But I was wondering how indexers, some of you guys were doing that currently.
Sort of already like how you've explained it, Ford. I mean, I'm running obviously I scale my services via an Nginx proxy, but there's another reverse proxy that sits in front of that, which is also Nginx, but it's a container provided by a pretty well-known group in the container space called linuxserver.io. And they do a sort of all-in-one Nginx container that includes a bunch of stuff like, it does all of the cert renewal for you. It organizes wildcarding for you. It has fail to ban included if you want to use that, if people know what fail to ban is for. Pretty common tool to use with SSH, for example. But you can use it to, do jailing on an Nginx proxy as well. And I basically just use that one proxy to, to resolve anything that's incoming on 443 or redirected from 80. In terms of throttling on the Nginx, the reverse proxy itself, I haven't done anything there, but I am paying. I have a dedicated leased line, and I'm paying for a sort of IDS. It's sort of like IDS Lite at the ISP end to monitor connections for me. And if there's anything funny going on, they'll shut it down immediately. But that's sort of like an interim solution. I'm looking to do intrusion detection at my end, and then also potentially put something in up at the ISP's end as well, because I have that option. Most people won't have that option, because from what I understand, if you're, in my limited research around, DDoSing and how they do it, if they've got to your end node, then you're already in trouble, right? You need to try and mitigate it further up the chain. Obviously, there's some gray area there for us, because what we're talking about is trying to stop potentially a customer from DDoSing us, from DOSing us, not just, the worst case scenario where you're actually being attacked, right? So there's definitely some room, I think, to do some tweaking on the rate limiting and that sort of stuff on our web proxies. But I think you also need to pair that with some kind of upstream tooling as well, because, once the graph gets popular, the haters come, and the haters are going to hate, and they're going to try various different things against the network to see, they're going to prod it, and they're going to try and attack it. And we all need to be ready for that. Indexers need to be ready for that today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the explanation. That's helpful to know how you're doing that. And it's similar to what I was thinking. And I just wanted to help provide some sort of simple Nginx setup to provide some external rate limiting. And then, as you touched on, there's a whole host of solutions that can be layers of solutions that can be added. And I think we should all be thinking about that as the network grows. And there's, potential attack vector with DOS. And there is the interesting compromise between wanting heavy traffic from real users and wanting to be able to identify malicious or excessive traffic as well. So I think what I'm going to do is start with an Nginx proxy that I'll share in one of the repos and have that be something that can be used by everyone. And then maybe I'll reach out to you to see that canonical container that you're using. That sounds like a really useful thing to share with everyone.
Sure.
Yeah, Jim, do you mind dropping a link to that in the office hours chat channel?
Yeah, no problem.
And then for one thing I'll say is, as much as, this isn't so much aligned with the longer term objectives, I think if we as indexers could whitelist gateway IPs, that would be one way of, just definitively cutting out any kind of bad traffic.
I think there's some technical issues with our providers with having stable IPs there, but I'll see if I can loop back around on that. That would massively simplify setting up a firewall and rate limiting. One factor that is difficult there, though, is the Explorer. Right now, I believe it uses the indexing status endpoint directly to the indexers that have a subgraph. So when you load a subgraph page, you get the progress for each indexer, and that's going directly to the indexer from the browser.
The client, yeah.
So there may be some firewall just on certain endpoints potentially.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I wouldn't really want to encourage a world where, indexers are completely cut off except from gateway IPs, because we need to be building a network that is resilient to, access from the open internet, because, that's the objective longer term. So I think if we were to have a list of gateway IPs, it would largely just to be able to configure rate limits, because, then we could effectively cut out everything that isn't the gateway and set a very conservative rate limit, 10 requests per second or 5 requests per second, and then just be able to trust that all of the high throughput stuff from the gateways is legit.
I could definitely see the number one counter argument from outside folks being that just another point of centralization, to just having that be clear that it's managed by the council and the foundation and stuff, and having that set up carefully. sounds important if it's gateway reliant.
I didn't follow that complete. I mean, I agree with the general sensitivity of the issue, of gateway centralization. But at least I don't think there's anything that the council would need to ratify or operate on here. It's just a matter of, if we had gateway IP addresses that were static or, consistent, it would just mean, traffic control for indexers would be a lot easier to do.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious how the control of that gateway would kind of propagate to the different responsibility roles on the network. But the general idea makes a lot of sense, for the problem that it's trying to solve.
Yeah, because we're not going down the route of trying to make the gateways governable, right? We're trying to go down the route of getting rid of the gateways completely eventually, I think. So maybe the idea there is that, yeah, that might be a good idea if we have some kind of idea that we're going to continue to need the gateways for X number of years, then maybe governance of the gates, certain elements of the gateway might make sense, yeah. But ultimately, the gateway is a set of problems that are yet to be solved, is the way I would look at it.
It's also worth saying that, the gateway isn't really a role that is cemented into the protocol. And so actually anybody can run a gateway. Right now, there's just a few gateways operated by Edge and Node, but that's largely, to kind of for the convenience and operational ease of that, right? We're not ready for many gateways or for no gateway. But yeah, at least fundamentally, there's no reason why the gateway is a privileged role.
Is there any concern to where the gateways might, let's say, be manipulated to favor one indexer over another in query traffic?
I believe that's technically possible, but it's trust-based today. I think Edge and Node would have very, very little incentive or frankly, quite a significant disincentive for that kind of thing. But ideally we want to build systems where that's not even possible. And really the only way that we can get to that is removing the gateway entirely. Which I suppose, to clarify, is just to say that the gateway is integrated into the client. So the client actually makes decisions about indexer selection themselves, even if that's abstracted away from the user. Cool. Okay. So other topics of conversation, we've got 15 minutes. Last time we touched on the potentially bad pattern of indexer behavior thread on the forum. And we got about 15 minutes into that and then had to stop. We could pick that up. Alternatively, there are a couple of other topics that we could discuss instead. How's everyone feeling?
There's also a question in the chat, Chris.
Thanks, Colson. So the question is, are you guys planning to add Reddit testnet? It would be extremely useful for the future. Yeah, that's a great question. That's not a question for us indexers, not yet at least. Presumably the Reddit testnet is an EVM compatible chain. Right, it's an Arbitrum instance. Okay, so yeah, that'll be EVM compatible. The hosted service already has Arbitrum support, so I imagine it might just be a bit of work with the Edge and Node team to get them to add support for Reddit's Arbitrum deployment. Yeah, that will probably come. Okay, cool. Well, we've got a suggestion from Derek from Data Nexus, who's suggesting that we discuss the topic of supporting public good subgraphs. And I know that this is a topic that Jim has spoken about as well before. So do either one of you want to kick off the discussion? Maybe for context, I will drop a link into the chat so with some associated discussion that happened in the Indexers channel a short while ago. But yeah, will either one of you kick off?
Eric?
Derek has volunteered you.
Okay, right.
Nice.
Right. Well, I mean, this idea of public goods kind of it sort of underlines what I see as a long-term requirement for the network, and that is that there are always going to be subgraphs that are useful to the wider community for some chain, but there's no central entity that's got the funding to pay for the queries that are required against that. I imagine a lot of this is going to occur once we, eventually move to, proof of stake Ethereum, and we get past the question mark, which is the transition from ETH1 nodes to ETH2 nodes, and people are going to still want data. They're going to still want to, be able to get a list of all of the ERC, all of the NFT transactions that happened in a block before ETH2 at some point. Right, so there's going to be a lot of subgraphs out there which are deemed useful, but there's no DAO or no individual who's willing to sort of step up and pay for it. So the question, if the graph is to become the de facto place to go for data, that means that the graph also needs to be responsible for those subgraphs that fall by the wayside when it comes to the economic incentives. So I guess the question I'm putting out there is there an incentive structure that somebody can think of that would incentivize indexers to index public goods subgraphs, and I have some ideas of that myself. Or do you think that there's enough goodwill within the network? I say that totally tongue in cheek to make sure that those subgraphs are kept alive.
Maybe I have some thoughts on that, and this is long-term sort of thinking, after having had some discussions on it. I think relying on goodwill only takes you so far. I think for the future end state, one thing you might envision is a decentralized approach to public good subgraphs. Imagine you have a subgraph feature where you can turn query fees on or off, and you would have a DAO sort of centered approach where the graph community then would, at a subgraph level, individually vote on it, right? We as a community feel this is a public goods subgraph and this one not, and it's followed, on a proposal, and it could follow a decentralized governance structure. Because one thing I think is going to be difficult and that needs to have definition is what is defined a public goods subgraph, right? And that could be one way for us to handle it. So it's very high level thinking there, but something like that would make sense to me.
Yeah, I think on top of that, adding some gamification for the indexers and maybe also whoever's voting, right? So the natural voters for something like that would be anyone who's actually got GRT in the protocol. So curators, stakers, delegators, indexers. And then, indexers that choose to, turn on that spigot or whatever for free subgraphs, or, however it might look. It might look like, I'll provide queries for these specific ones, or it might just be a binary on-off. I'll provide for public goods or I won't, right? And indexers that do decide to contribute, they get some kind of verification tag on their name in the Explorer or wherever. Little gamifications like that, I think, tied to some kind of DAO could be useful, and they could also be used later on for things like measuring whether an indexer is good enough for providing other services, right?
Reputation.
Exactly. So it's the beginnings of some sort of reputation system, a really basic one, but maybe sometimes that's the way it should be. It should be very basic, and it's tied to an indexer's address, not really an identity or anything like that. But yeah, they're all long-term things, right? But I think we do need to start thinking about them now, so that maybe it's already a problem and we're not noticing it. I don't know. I'm seeing more and more requests in the channels to index specific subgraphs. At some point, there's going to be, I don't know, an official ENS subgraph. And well, ENS is a bad example because they've now got a massive treasury. But if you imagine they didn't, but they wanted to use the graph, then immediately we're up against the public's goods problem. I know most indexers I know would choose to just support it, but you can't. Again, like Oliver said, goodwill is a finite resource. It only lasts so long. How do you incentivize indexers long term to continue to provide for public's goods subgraphs?
I think I'm pretty aligned with that. I like, there have to be incentives. And I do think that reputation-based incentives, probably make most sense. In some sense, they're also quite speculative, right? Like, as an indexer, I could choose to participate and effectively speculate on the future value of the reputation gains of doing so. And, that's certainly something that I would choose to do. And I think that would be particularly true if, as Jim has hinted, these aspects of reputation are encoded in effectively a composable way, because then, at some point there can be an airdrop, some DAO airdrop to indexers who do this provably in the protocol on-chain in the future. And you kind of like, the composability of the space means there's this massive, kind of speculative design space that exists, on top of that composable reputation.
100%, and it extends beyond the indexers into whoever makes the decisions about which subgraphs should be marked as public goods and which wouldn't, right? There's more, it expands into the ecosystem immediately. Who's actually taking the time, which delegators are taking the time to thoughtfully think about which, these applications that subgraph developers might make to be a public good subgraph, taking the time to really think about it and work out whether it's a yes or a no or a maybe. And then eventually potentially getting rewarded based on your work, based on your reputation. I mean, this is the model we're seeing right now. It's really basic and a bit broken, but I think that model is going to continue. That meme of, I'm going to go and I'm going to interact with Uniswap on 500 different addresses to see if I might get some airdrop from Uniswap, That, but the more refined version that we're going to get over time, I think is a real good way of getting people to participate in these public goods. There's loads of examples, right? Uniswap is a bad one. But I mean, I guess a better one, Chris, that you understand more than I do is Lobster DAO, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. For anyone that's not aware, Lobster DAO is just a Telegram group that has existed since the kind of OG days of DeFi. And somebody kept track of interactions that happened in that channel. And it's a pretty big channel, like hundreds and hundreds, if not over 1,000 members. And late last year, there was an airdrop of NFTs to active contributors in that channel. And it just turned out to be a really high signal airdrop. The people that were active in that channel tended to be, high signal people, developers, people actively building protocols. And so that NFT airdrop has actually been used as a subsequent target for other airdrops. So yeah, any way that we can kind of build these, composable reputation that is also reflective of value, valuable participants, I think, yeah, is a good direction to go in. I do think it's hard to kind of overstate the difficulty of public goods funding. It's really tough to get right, and I think it's somewhat rare that we have this kind of set of speculative, reputational speculative incentives. Like, you could argue that that's not truly a public good, right? Because there is asymmetric upside to taking that bet theoretically. I hope we can exploit that position of, being in this wave of transformational technology, and there's just so much value to flow into the space that these asymmetric, risk return profiles exist in so many places. But yeah, I think it's a whole lot harder in, more ossified and kind of thoroughly adopted systems. It's hard to get people to pay for public goods.
And there's also models that I've seen where the government, subsidizes. There's some way to prove that a public good is helping people and providing value. There can be some sort of like tax credit similar to bottle return. That's an artificial market created and supported by a local municipality. So I'm sure there will be some subgraphs that fall into that kind of public domain relationship, that if there's somebody that could foster a relationship with the local municipality, that might be a way to provide incentive as well. Some sort of, going off of the Dow thing, just sourcing funding and relationships to incentivize that.
Yeah, I can see all kinds of situations. You'll have some where there's no funding available for a subgraph. There'll be some where there's some funding available for a subgraph, but it's not necessarily going to cover all the query requirements, right? And I envision a DAO where subgraphs basically apply, and they'll have some kind of template they apply via, which talks about what's the purpose of their subgraph and what funding do they have right now to pay for queries, that type of thing, really to gauge the seriousness of their the usefulness of their subgraph. So it's not going to be some black and white thing. It would be, that's why the DAO exists, right? Is to cut through that. That's where the work is done, is in cutting through that ambiguity to figure out whether it or not something is a public good or not, and whether it, we can support it or not. And of course, you also need to sort of have already fostered yourself as the de facto place to go for data, right? That's important too. And I wonder if that's that's a chicken before the egg type situation or not. Do you foster that before you become, the dominating force in data middleware for Web3, or do you do it once you've become the dominating force? Which is it, or maybe a sort of hybrid of the two? I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
An interesting question for sure. But we are at the top of the hour. So that brings us to the end of Indexer Office Hours number 44. Thank you all for joining us, and particularly those who contributed either in the chat or via voice. These sessions are all about you and the value that you bring. So thank you for contributing. Until next time, we'll see you next week for IOH number 45. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, guys.
Bye.
See y'all. Have a great week.